Aloha and welcome to Figments, the Power of Imagination. I'm Dan Leaf, go by Fig, thus Figments. And it's a pleasure to be back here for our third episode. I'd like to thank ThinkTech Hawaii for giving us this voice, giving me this voice. We had some great feedback from episode 2 with General Retired Dave Fingers Goldfein. That was so much fun for me. I hope the viewers liked it as much as I did. He's a great man and just a great friend. I'd especially like to thank one of the guys I flew combat with, Beef, we'll leave it at that, his call sign, for sending me his written memoirs of my first real combat mission as a 46-year-old one-star. It was a very accurate recollection and made me smile, and I connected with a lot of folks on it. And that's what we want to do. We want to make you smile. We want to entertain you and inspire you and give you some insight to stories that people have, because we have a concept here. And I can't see the slides coming up, but hopefully they are. The concept is that all great things come from the imagination. So next slide, please, Eric. And the word figment has kind of a negative connotation, like it's fanciful or dreamlike, not reality. But that's where everything starts, with a dream. And all great achievements come out of that through hard work, perseverance, and some good luck. So that's what we're here for. And as you saw on the title slide, we're here to do that with a former U.S. diplomat, Simon Lee. Aloha, Simon. How are you?
Aloha, Fig. Very happy to be here today.
Happy to have you here, Simon. You and I both agree that this is not a political discussion. We're not going to talk politics. We might talk policy, but we're just kind of pragmatic about making the world a better place. So any of you tuned in for some biting political commentary from either side? Sorry, not happening. And Simon and I, like General Goldfein, are old friends. We're friends now for what, 2 months, something like that, Simon?
Something like that.
Yeah,
we'd actually minutes, we'll have much bigger numbers.
Exactly. I can't do math though, so we're out of luck with that. So Simon and I had actually met in Tokyo back when I was the director at Asia-Pacific Center for Security Studies, and he was still actively serving as a diplomat. But then we had a hot coffee at the Honolulu Coffee Company, not a sponsor of our show yet, and found that we were muy simpatico on things generally, but especially on North Korea. And eventually that'll be the topic of the show. But first, I got to share the great story of Simon's life. Foreign Service officer with the U.S. State Department, and you're now retired and working as a consultant here in Honolulu, right?
Yes.
And when did you retire exactly? It's been
let's see, I retired from the State Department at the end of November, and I just started working with Booz Allen Hamilton in early December.
And we probably have to say that all the views you express do not represent your company, because you're not being paid to do this. This isn't part of your work, so folks don't read into it. But there are going to be some good, interesting views. And you're a graduate of well, let's go back to the start. You're an immigrant. This is an immigrant success story. Your family immigrated from South Korea in 1976, if I remember.
Yes, that's right.
Right. Do you remember much of that holy cow, I'm a 5-year-old in America thing?
Well, you know, I do have some memories of that period, both while we were still in Korea and then immediately after we arrived in the United States. And yeah, I mean, this is 1976 we're talking about, and you know, you couldn't expect a broader contrast. I do still, ironically, remember old U.S. Embassy building, you know, right in Gwanghwamun. And
isn't that interesting? An interesting thing that your memory hangs on to.
Exactly. And very ironic that I ended up working in that building 2 times as a U.S. diplomat, you know, many decades later.
Yeah, yours is an amazing story. We got a picture, 2 pictures, if we could bring those up. On the left is one of the favorite pictures of another person I've ever seen, because that's young Sangmin, Korean name, with a soccer ball that's almost bigger than you. But I first went to Korea in the U.S. Air Force in 1978, and that's a chicken skin photo. It brings back so many memories. The clothing of the time, the big soccer ball, the wood of buildings there in South Korea, and it brings back memories and fondness for the people in the place. So I love that. But even more, I love the picture next to it, where you're presiding at an event as a U.S. diplomat. Tell us about that event, because that's kind of cool.
Sure. That was an event that was sponsored by the U.S. Embassy in Seoul, celebrating the centennial of the first Korean immigration to the United States. If I recall correctly, the very first Korean immigrants to the United States were plantation workers in Hawaii. And yet another piece of irony that
Yeah.
two pieces of irony. One was that, as a kid was born in Korea, immigrated at a young age to the United States, became a U.S. diplomat, returned to South Korea to work at the U.S. Embassy, um, delivering remarks for the centennial event of Korean immigration to the United States, and then subsequent to retiring from the Foreign Service, ending up in Hawaii, where the
Yep.
first Korean immigration took place.
You got to love that connective tissue. And I love the immigrant story, because we're a nation not only of immigrants, but largely of immigrants. And you bring so much, you personally brought so much to our country. And I'm grateful for that and for your 21 years of service. If my math is correct, you were a diplomat for 21 years and you spent like 19 of them overseas.
That's right. And
Yeah.
and all 19 of them were spent in the Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific
Yeah.
region.
I'm going to recount those in a bit. I'll step through it, but first we got to get to how you became a diplomat story, because it's not easy to become a diplomat. First of all, I could never do it because I'm not diplomatic, but it's also an arduous intellectual path where you have to take a very robust series of exams and interviews. Many of the diplomats that I've known, and I think you'd agree that the military and the diplomatic corps work together in Asia Pacific far more than most people realize. Would you say that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very close and important partnership.
Yeah. So from talking to other diplomats, it's something they set their sights on, often starting in the Peace Corps, interestingly.
Yes, it's true.
Right. And they just get in their mind that they're going to be a diplomat, and they work towards it day and night and go through the rigor of being prepared for the Foreign Service exam. You, on the other hand, went to Penn State, the Penn State University, and then got your law degree, and you're working as a consultant successfully after those two endeavors. And so you must have been planning to take the Foreign Service exam or not.
Ah, yeah, that
Yeah, I'm setting the hook, Simon, for what a story that I love. So please share it with our viewers.
sure. I mean, I think calling me the accidental diplomat is probably the most appropriate description. Throughout my university years and during my time, brief time working as a consultant after graduating from law school, a diplomatic career really was not what I had in mind. Um, After working roughly about a year or so in my consulting firm, this is not Booz Allen Hamilton, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
but my previous employer, um, I one evening, a friend of mine and I had one drink too many, and
Or
I
so.
woke up. Yeah, the perils of being, in one's 20s. I woke up but then I woke up the following morning with a splitting headache and noticing that my computer monitor remained on. And I thought, yeah, why didn't I turn this off the night before? So I looked at the computer monitor, and the computer monitor was displaying in the web browser the State Department website and a message indicating you have registered for the Foreign Service Officer test on February blank blank 1998. And I thought to myself, what in the world did I do? Um, And it was one of those occasions where I had absolutely no recollection of ever having done
Yeah,
that.
I'm afraid many of us from our 20s have those occasions. So you closed your laptop and didn't follow up, or what?
Well, so I thought, I sat there thinking for several minutes, thinking, all right, should I just back out of this? Should I just cancel it? Or what should I do? And I thought and thought and decided, you know, I don't, I really doubt I'll pass, but why not? Let's just take it. I have nothing better to do on a Saturday morning.
And
So
most folks don't pass, frankly. It's a very difficult exam.
it is. It's a very difficult exam. The passing rate is, I don't know the exact figures, but it's not
It's
terribly
low.
high.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a two-part process. First you pass the written exam, which ended up doing unexpectedly. And then I was invited to take the oral assessment in Washington, D.C. Again, something I did not expect would happen.
Mm-hmm.
There were 12 of us taking the assessment that day. At the end of the entire day-long process, each of us was called into the room with the proctors one by one. And
This
I
sounds
noticed,
pretty spooky, pretty clandestine.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think more so than that was, I was the last one to be called.
Wow.
So, I had 11 people in front of me go into the room silently and then leaving the room silently, picking up their bags silently, and then vacating the premises silently. And
Wow.
after looking at 11 people in front of me doing that and being the last one called, I thought, okay, well, they'll just break the bad news to me. Somebody in front of me must have passed.
Yeah, of
So I
course.
go into the room. As soon as I walk in, the proctors greet me with a congratulations, you passed.
Wow. And I
And
do have, through sensitive sources and methods, I have a picture of the proctors who greeted you. There they are. That's so Men in Black like. I can't believe it. How did you feel when you were
uh,
selected?
well, I was stunned for a moment, and I was actually kind of hoping that they would have flashed one of those memory wiping devices on me.
I can use that
But
sometimes.
it was a yeah, it was a very quick transition from shock to elation to incredulousness. I
Wow.
have to say, many thoughts went through my head right at that moment in a in a very brief moment.
Well,
Um,
so from then, you're now a have a distinguished 21-year career in central casting. Couldn't have done better. We got three pictures of you as a diplomat here that looks right out of Men in Black. Eric, if you there you go. Look at there's the man traveling the world, and you did travel the world: Philippines, Malaysia, Seoul, Tokyo, China, DC for a brief stint, then back to Seoul, then back to Tokyo. That's your career, almost all overseas, as we said.
yeah, yeah.
I,
And
I'm going to make you name one highlight. So we got
okay.
a picture of you with Admiral Harris, I'm sorry, Ambassador Harris, that we'll look at before we dive into North Korea. And, but what's the one thing you remember, the one highlight of your job?
Wow. There are so many, memorable moments in my 21 years in the Foreign Service. Clearly, spending 1 year working with Ambassador Harris, former retired Admiral
Mm-hmm.
Harris, at Embassy Seoul was a very, very, important part of my career and one that I really treasure. Um, but I have to say, with everything that's happened, I really must say that having had several opportunities to sit across the table from North Koreans, um, really, I think, uh, without a doubt, had to have been
Okay.
probably the most memorable, parts of
Well, let's dive into that more after we take a quick break to look at what's coming up on Figments, the Power of Imagination. In 2 weeks, I'll have with me my partner in Phase -1, Dr. Ala Murabit. Google her name, folks. She's awesome. You won't want to miss that. Then Susan Helms is an incredibly busy retired 3-star, and like me, great astronaut, great friend, brilliant person. I hope to have her on the 22nd, have some cancer survivor friends talk about their figment of recovery on April 5th. And then two more friends. I'm blessed with great friends. Andrea Maria, Jacques Maton, lead writers for the first couple of years of Mad Men, and they'll talk about how they take their figments and get them to the silver screen or the small screen or whatever screen you happen to be using these days. So please tune in, and when you do, don't forget to click all the things that help us be popular, because it's good to be popular. Okay, Simon, so your views on North Korea are understandable, but it's an obsession of mine too. It's long been an obsession of mine. Comes from several things. Number one, the phase -1 is it's something that got under my skin in my military service, as we talked about. We do a lot of planning from phase 0, the dangerous status quo, through 1, 2, 3, X. That's all about things getting worse. And I don't think we plan actively enough for things to get better. And that is sometimes more the State Department job than a military job, but we have to think about it, or they'll only get better by accident. And coupling that with the book that was shown there, Nothing to Envy, Ordinary Life in North Korea by Barbara Demick, that book got under my skin too, and it still does. And it haunts me with an image of the ordinary North Korean. So I was obsessed with it, and all I could do was write. So I wrote something about it. I wrote a paper for the Oslo Forum, and if you could show that, a practical approach to the Korean Peninsula was the title of it. It got some notoriety because, which is surprising because I got D's in English, folks, and all of my former teachers are rolling over in their chair or grave, or whatever the case may be. But all I could do was write, and you lived it. And you worked peace in North Korea. And so tell me about that. Tell me about these experiences you alluded to, dealing directly with North Koreans. One thing I'd really like to know as you do that, Simon, is did being a native of South Korea and a U.S. diplomat complicate things, make them better? How did that work out? But over to you for dealing with North Koreans.
Sure, thank you. I'll kind of start in reverse chronological order from on the points that you raised. Starting with whether being of South Korean origin, but being a U.S. diplomat, whether that created any complications for me. For me personally, no, there were no complications. Obviously, when I took the oath of becoming a U.S. diplomat, I made it 100% clear that my loyalty lies with the United States and that I am working for the government of the United States and protecting the U.S. Constitution and serving the people of the United States. And then, in dealing with our South Korean allies, with the North Korean delegation, with our Japanese allies, with the Russian delegation, and with the PRC delegation, my ethnic origin really didn't factor in very much at all. And I think that was to be expected. We're in a room full of diplomats, and they're all quite savvy about the way these things work, when it comes to nationality and immigration and things of that nature. And they're quite intimately aware of the type of society that America is. For me, kind of a really fun, memorable moment was in the middle of the six-party talks when the six delegations, broke for coffee, and we were milling
Hey, I'm
around.
going to interrupt, Simon, just to point out to folks that you've worked in 4 of the 6 countries of the 6 parties as a diplomat, and you're fluent in Japanese, Chinese too?
Yes, Japanese, Chinese, and Korean.
Yeah, so you've got and English, a tactical advantage when you're doing this. Sorry to interrupt, but that's important.
Sure, no problem at all. And actually, the point that you just raised kind of speaks to the heart of the point that I wanted to make, and that is, as we were having our coffee break, I was having coffee with two other people, and one of them was a member of the North Korean delegation. The other was a member of the South Korean delegation. All three of us were speaking English with each other, and each of
How
us had a
about
different
that?
accent.
How about that?
Yeah, all three of us looked Korean, and each of us had a different colored passport. So
Wow.
that was a kind of a fun little anecdote to
Yep.
insert in there.
So, how was it dealing with the North Koreans? Did you find them just like everybody else, or it's a very closed society to throw out the standard cliche or generalization?
Yeah,
Certainly.
I think I'd have to, draw a very clear distinction in the types of North Koreans that I met over the course of my
Hmm.
career. The very first ones I met actually were in South Korea, and these are, recent North Korean defectors to South Korea who have
Hmm.
resettled in South Korea through the South Korean government's resettlement program. And they of course have a very specific view on things, particularly towards the regime in the north, as well as
Hmm.
their reflections on how the South Korean government has welcomed them and helped them assimilate into South Korean society. And then the second uh, category of North Koreans I met um, actually were in China, and these were North Korean defectors who sought refuge at one of our U.S. diplomatic facilities in China, and uh, I had to go out on assistance from our embassy in Seoul to help uh, our diplomatic facility in China figure things out on how to deal with these people, and how to coordinate with the South Korean government on getting them resettled in South Korea at the end of the day. And then the third category would be the official North Koreans,
Hmm.
members of North Korean delegations. The very first North Korean delegation I ever dealt with was during my time at our embassy in Kuala Lumpur. I was a second tour
Oh,
officer,
really?
so
Okay. Hmm.
yeah, so very junior. But I was asked to be one of the note takers for the U.S. North Korea missile talks that took place in Kuala Lumpur. And that was my first exposure to North Korean officials. And I gathered that most of them were from the North Korean Foreign Ministry, although I wouldn't put it past them to have members of other government ministries and
Sure.
agencies represented there. And then subsequent to that, that was in 2001, and subsequent to that, I had a chance to participate in a few rounds of the Six Party Talks, starting in 2005. So that was essentially my total exposure to North Koreans. I've not yet had a chance to be on North Korean soil yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Um, and I made the story a bit long, but I think the point that I wanted to make was that dealing with ordinary North Koreans who have left North Korea and have successfully settled in South Korea, and ordinary North Koreans who fled North Korea and have tried to find refuge somewhere in China, and then official North Koreans. Three very different categories of people with very different outlooks.
And different lives.
And
As
different
you said
lives.
that, those of us who have the North Korean uh, bee in our bonnet, if you will,
Yeah.
think of those in South Korea with significant challenges. It's not an
Yes.
easy assimilation.
Sure.
Um, and those in who escaped to China, not much of an escape. That can be a very hard life, as several books will tell you.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
the officials.
Yeah.
So let's, while we have time, and I'm going to wind up just as I did last week, wishing I had more time, because it will take more time with the not paying us yet, Honolulu Coffee Company, for another coffee. But um, I really want to kind of get to your view of North Korea from your diplomatic experience, not just sitting across the table, but working these policy issues. Do you see North Korea as a clear and present danger to the United States, to the region, to Northeast Asia, if you will, and maybe to the world? Just that's a as direct a question as I can ask a diplomat.
Sure. And I'll answer as directly as you could expect from a diplomat,
Yeah.
and the answer is no.
Ah,
Are they a threat? Yes, they are. Are they a clear and present threat? Um, it's it's a tricky question. And I think to a certain extent, we have to look at history and data to reflect that. And one of them is, uh, the Korean War broke out in 1950, and then the Armistice Agreement was signed in 1953. Yes, there have been some, raised tension over the years. There have been many ups and downs, and there have been many incidents. But the last time you've seen a full-out armed attack on South Korean territory by North Korean forces, uh, frankly, was 1953. Yes, there were the shelling attacks in Yeongjong-do
Yeongjong-do in
Island.
December. Yeah.
Yeah, as well as on the South Korean frigate, the Cheonan.
Cheonan.
Yeah, and that was goodness. It's already been a decade since that happened.
Yeah, and so that's a great perspective, and I know we just have a couple of minutes, and I'd love to debate because I do see them as more of a threat, but not a threat that we should try to provoke or that we have to. I think it's a workable threat.
Yeah.
So we went through decades of strategic patience, and then we did maximum pressure with sanctions and harsh words, frankly, and then some direct engagement between then President Trump and Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
What next? What would you advise how would you sort of, in a nutshell, describe what the policy of the next administration should be? And I know that's the challenge to nutshell something
Yes.
that complex.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And ironically, the fact that the Trump administration did go ahead with a direct summit level engagement,
Yeah.
with North Korea, in some ways that's, achieved sort of, I wouldn't say progress, but it certainly changed the dynamics considerably,
Yep.
for whatever we've enjoyed for all these years. But at the same time, it's created additional complications. It's one of those things where if the other side is already accustomed to dealing with you at the summit level, at the head of state level, it gets very difficult to go back to a senior yet still working level,
Yep.
Level of engagement. And
But then again, on the other hand, Simon, you have established a way to communicate that we haven't. So it's a conundrum, but I hope that we'll stay engaged and not fall into benign neglect. Every new administration has too many priorities and too little capacity to deal with all of them, but not just for the threat or non-threat, but the tensions, but also for the people of North Korea. I hope that they'll stay engaged. And I'm going to have to wrap this up. And I wish we had an hour again, and maybe we'll get back and do this some more, Simon, because you've got a fascinating life, and it's a very important topic. We haven't even talked about what China's role might be or the relationships between South Korea and Japan. And so we've got a lot of work to do and a lot of coffee to drink. So thank you very much, Simon. I've got to wrap up and sign off. So General Goldfein in episode 2 asked, what would Fig do? I'm going to give you a what would Fig do every episode. So my what would Fig do today is read that book, Nothing to Envy, Ordinary Life in North Korea by Barbara Demick. It will educate you and inspire you and make you pretty sad. So please watch the show. Go to the playlist if you've missed other interviews or other sessions. And don't forget to click like, share, or anything that makes us look awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks, Simon. Aloha, brother.